What if I told you the anime endings that hurt you the absolute most are usually the ones you never truly forget?
I mean, not the happy endings, not those perfect, neat little victories, not the stories where, everyone magically survives. I'm talking about the endings that leave you staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., just feeling completely empty for days. Why? Why do we become so emotionally attached to sadness? Why do tragic anime endings stay stuck in our minds for years, sometimes even longer than real memories? And why is it that a bittersweet ending often feels, more real than a happy one?
So, today we're diving deep into the psychology behind tragic anime endings, and exactly why pain in fiction can actually feel strangely beautiful. Whether it's Attack on Titan or Your Lie in April, from Cyberpunk Edgerunners to Clannad, anime has basically mastered something most stories just completely fail to do. It makes suffering feel meaningful. And according to psychologists, there's a real, scientific reason we are so deeply drawn to emotional pain in fiction. Because these tragic endings, they don't just entertain us, they mirror our reality.
Let's look at Chapter 1, The Beauty of Bittersweet. Most stories out there try to teach us one simple thing. Good people win, love survives, and everything just works out perfectly in the end. But real life doesn't really work like that, does it? Sometimes good people lose, sometimes dreams just die, and sometimes love arrives a little too late. And honestly, that's exactly why these tragic anime endings feel so incredibly powerful.
Psychologists actually call this bittersweet realism. It's this unique emotional experience where sadness and beauty somehow exist at the exact same time. The ending hurts, yeah, but it also feels completely truthful. And as humans, we are just naturally drawn toward emotional truths. Because deep down, we all know life is temporary. That quiet awareness is exactly what makes these emotional stories hit so much harder.
Moving into Chapter 2, let's explore the psychology of sadness. Because here's something absolutely fascinating. Studies show that people actually enjoy sad music, tragic films, and heavily emotional stories because they create this perfectly safe environment for emotional release. There's a term for this. It's called benign masochism. Basically, your brain is experiencing pain, but without any actual physical danger. So when an anime completely destroys your heart emotionally, your mind gets to process things like grief, empathy, nostalgia, and attachment in a totally controlled way. And believe it or not, that emotional release can actually feel deeply satisfying. It's a lot like why we cry while listening to a really sad song. The pain in the fiction literally becomes emotionally cleansing for us. Psychologists also strongly connect this to catharsis, which is the profound release of suppressed emotions. Sometimes, we aren't even really crying for the character. We cry because the story somehow unlocked emotions that we had buried deep inside ourselves.
Chapter 3, The Art of Impermanence. But why anime specifically? Why do anime tragedies stick with us so much more than a lot of movies or TV shows? Well, it's because anime spends an extraordinary amount of time building emotional attachment. Think about those quiet slice-of-life moments, the intimate conversations, the deep character backstories, the shared suffering. Anime makes these characters feel completely alive right before it destroys them. And the longer we emotionally invest in these fictional characters, the stronger that psychological bond becomes. Neuroscience actually shows that our brains often react to fictional relationships almost identically to real emotional connections. That's why losing a fictional character can genuinely truly feel like grief.
Your brain knows they aren't real, but your emotions react as if they mattered anyway, because emotionally, they really did.
You see, one of the deepest themes in anime is rooted in Japanese culture itself, the beauty of impermanence. It's a concept very similar to mono no aware, which is this profound awareness that absolutely everything beautiful eventually ends. Cherry blossoms bloom so beautifully precisely because they don't last very long. Love feels precious because time eventually destroys it. Tragic anime endings essentially force us to confront something we constantly fear, the fact that nothing lasts forever. And strangely enough, that's exactly what makes those moments feel so much more meaningful.
When you compare them, a permanent, perfectly happy ending can often feel a bit artificial, right? Like it's disconnected from reality. But a bittersweet ending, that reminds us to actually value what existed while it lasted. And it's that exact emotional contradiction that creates such unforgettable stories.
Which brings us to Chapter 4, Why We Are So Obsessed with Emotional Damage. Now here's the kind of weird part. Why do we rewatch anime that just totally emotionally destroyed us? Why do we willingly choose to suffer all over again? Well, it's because humans don't just seek out happiness, we crave emotional intensity.
Research on nostalgia
actually shows that painful memories tend to soften over time. Our brains slowly start prioritizing the emotional meaning over the suffering itself. So, when fans revisit a tragic anime, they're not really chasing the pain. They're reconnecting with the emotions that once made them feel so deeply alive. And this is exactly why fandom communities on places like Reddit, TikTok, and Instagram are constantly reviving these tragic scenes. The edits, the quotes, the sad music compilations, the raw reaction videos. People are collectively reliving that emotional pain because shared sadness creates a real sense of connection. And social media just amplifies the whole thing. A heartbreaking anime moment becomes so much more than just a scene. It transforms into a shared emotional experience across millions of people.
On TikTok especially, you'll notice the tragic anime edits absolutely dominate engagement. And why is that? Because emotionally intense content directly triggers stronger memory retention. Your brain is wired to remember emotional experiences way more than neutral ones. Plus, sadness increases reflection. Happy endings usually just, conclude the story, you move on. But tragic endings, they continue living right there inside your head.
You start asking these unresolved questions that basically create an obsession. What if things were different? Did they really deserve that ending? Could it have somehow been avoided? Your brain just keeps searching and searching for some kind of emotional closure, and those unresolved emotions create that lingering obsession. That's why fans will spend literally years discussing endings from anime like Neon Genesis Evangelion or Akame ga Kill. It's not because those endings were comfortable, it's because discomfort creates permanence.
Let's move to Chapter 5. Ultimately, tragedy makes characters human. Think about it. Perfect, flawless characters are actually really difficult to relate to. But broken characters? They aren't. Characters who fail, who suffer, who lose absolutely everything. They feel deeply human to us. And when those tragic endings happen, they almost always expose the deepest, most raw truths about those characters. Their fear, their regret, their love, and their sacrifice.
In so many anime, tragedy becomes the final moment of true emotional honesty. And that honesty is exactly what we connect to. We don't connect to perfection. We connect to humanity.
And that leads us to Chapter 6, Finding Hope in Loss. As we grow older, a lot of us actually start preferring bittersweet endings over purely happy ones. And that's because our own maturity completely changes how we define hope.
When we're kids, we often see hope simply as winning. But as adults, we often see hope as surviving emotionally, despite experiencing profound loss. That's exactly why bittersweet endings resonate so deeply with older audiences. The characters might lose something incredibly important, but they still grow, they still love, they still continue on. And honestly, that reflects real life far more accurately than any fantasy perfection ever could.
So maybe tragic anime endings stay with us because they remind us of those difficult things we constantly try to avoid, that life is fragile, that love is temporary, that people change, and that happiness is just never guaranteed. But maybe that's exactly what makes those moments so beautiful in the first place, not because they last forever, but precisely because they don't. And perhaps the stories that completely break our hearts are actually the ones that understand humanity the most.
So I have to ask, what tragic anime ending stayed with you the longest? Take a moment to think about it, and when you're ready, tell me in the comments.
If you found some comfort in this and you enjoy deep dives into stories and human behavior, consider subscribing to Psychology with Divine. Let's keep exploring together.